Good day. I am Major General Ulysses S. Grant, and you find me here in camp on Orchard Knob in Chattanooga, Tennessee, or just a bit east of Chattanooga, Tennessee. I should like today to reflect with you about the battles for Chattanooga. It is now November the 26th of 1863. And much has transpired in the last 3 days, nay, even the last 3 months. This began with my being transferred here, ordered here, and arriving on October 23rd. In 5 days, we had the Cracker Line open, and a 45,000-man starving Army of the Cumberland was able to begin getting food and supplies again. After about a month or so, we began to ruminate about how to get out of the siege situation we were in. And in mid-November, I developed plans, a 3-part plan to break out of the siege and defeat Bragg's army. It was involving Hooker with about 20,000 troops coming from the Army of the Potomac, and Sherman with another approximately 20,000 troops coming from Vicksburg through Memphis and up the Memphis and Charleston Railroad. They're both west and north of Chattanooga because they didn't want them to come in to eat what food there was here, and they had supplies with them and were getting supplies. On about November the 7th, though, I found out that the maps of this area were not as accurate as they could be, and certainly as accurate as I needed them to be. Particularly my left, Bragg's right, the north end of Missionary Ridge. As you're looking south from Orchard Knob in Chattanooga, Missionary Ridge is to the east to my left, and coming down is the north end of Missionary Ridge, where the railroad goes through to the Western Atlantic Railroad, the tunnel going through the hill there called Tunnel Hill, and where Bragg is getting his supplies and reinforcements and so forth. My plan was to have Sherman cross the river and take the north end of Missionary Ridge, while Hooker took the south end of Missionary Ridge down near Chickamauga Creek, the southern Chickamauga Creek, and at the base of Lookout Mountain. And Thomas, with the Army of the Cumberland, would go straight across that plain some several hundred yards and then up Missionary Ridge some 500 feet in elevation. That was the plan, and I wanted to get all of that in action by November the 18th, because you must know that Burnside is in quite a jam in Knoxville, something a very difficult situation, and the president is rightly very concerned. President Lincoln has a driving concern for the people of East Tennessee because they wanted to secede, as did West Virginia from Virginia. But because East Tennessee, the mountainous region of Tennessee, is completely surrounded by Confederate states, they could not secede. But the Unionist sentiment is strong there, and those people are taking some horrific punishment. And President Lincoln is determined to get them some relief. So he sends Burnside's there, and now Burnside's in a jam, and he wants me to get him some relief. And by the 18th of November, I want to kick my plan into action. But because of heavy rains in Tennessee, roads are soups of mud, quagmires. The Tennessee River, indeed, has risen. Our pontoon bridges are being washed away, and that's aggravated by the rebels being north of the city and letting rafts loose and log jams loose, and they come down and punch through the pontoon bridges and tear them up, and they have to be repaired. So it's the 22nd or so of November when I'm able to start to get everything in order to launch. Now, on the 22nd, I get reports from deserters coming into our lines that are corroborated by loyal locals that Bragg has a substantial troop movement away from Chattanooga. And my great concern was that he was going to escape and get around and go to either Burnside's aid or go south to Atlanta and down through Rossville, Georgia. And I did not want that to occur. I didn't want Burnside to be beleaguered any more than he is. And I certainly didn't want Bragg to escape. But there is something afoot going on. And I had to get a better look and I had to take some action. So on the morning of the 23rd, I had T.J. Wood, or General Thomas, George Thomas, ordered General T.J. Wood to take Orchard Knob, a hill about 100 feet in elevation that would get me closer to Missionary Ridge and give me a better idea of the reality of the situation. So he gathered actually there were about 20,000 troops. Howard was to his left with a corps. Sheridan was to his right with another corps, and he had some 14,000 troops there, Army of the Cumberland, that had come out. Now, by now, they are well fed, they are well armed, they are well rested, and they are well ready for a fight. They remember Chickamauga. And they're smarting because my troops in the Army of the Tennessee, although I try to stop it, they have been teasing them no end that they can't fight, that they're just not the soldiers they should be. So they feel they have something to prove, but they're wanting to get into the scrap too. So General Wood has 14,000 soldiers on that plain between Chattanooga to the east of it and Missionary Ridge. He was very clever. He made it look like it was a drill, like they were having a grand review. In fact, the Confederates were all elbowing each other and pointing and saying, "What's going on over there?" And some of them wrote in letters and diaries that it was the grandest review they ever saw. And they thought it was a review until the signal cannons boomed and the bugles blew, and 14,000 men were rushing several hundred yards to their trenches at the base of or around Orchard Knob. And the Confederates had time to get off one shot, and they were overwhelmed. We lost, I think, 1,115 wounded, killed and wounded, not many killed. And the Confederates had 600 and a few were captured. So that was the morning of the 23rd. And George Thomas and I moved our headquarters out to Orchard Knob. So I'm on Orchard Knob, and to my left is Missionary Ridge, and over my left shoulder out here is the northern end of Missionary Ridge, Tunnel Hill Railroad, where I'm going to send Sherman, and to my right is Lookout Mountain. There were some good and some bad elements here. Sherman was late. He was uncharacteristically late getting into place. And as I said, that was uncharacteristic. He was slowed by mud and rain. He'd been ordered by General Halleck to repair the Memphis and Charleston Railroad as he went, which slowed him to a snail's pace. And it seemed forever for him to get in place and get to the Tennessee River. The plan was that he was going to cross the Tennessee. We had 116 pontoon boats to make a bridge, and he was going to take the North Chickamauga Creek and go to the northern end of Missionary Ridge, our left, Bragg's right. And I intended for Sherman to take the north end and roll Bragg's line up as it went to the north to south. And Hooker had been in the valley there and had nearly 20,000 troops. And I'd had him there in something of an occupation posture, but with that many troops, that was too many troops just to be in occupation posture. So I decided to send him as a demonstration against Lookout Mountain. That's about 1,200 feet off to my southwest. And it turns out that they only had about General Walthall of the Confederate Army only had about 1,200 troops on top of that mountain. The west side of the mountain is sheer and extremely difficult to get up. The east side of the mountain toward us even has a flat with the Cravens house, where Mr. Cravens, who built, I think, the first iron works in Chattanooga, lives, and actually farmed that area. Had a pretty extensive farm up there, so there was some level ground. And I wanted, or George Thomas gave Hooker the orders that make a demonstration. When you make a demonstration on Lookout Mountain while Sherman is taking Tunnel Hill. I've got Thomas waiting in the middle to assault Missionary Ridge. And Hooker, who was still smarting from Chancellorsville, decided that he was going to show me what a demonstration looked like. And he had no intentions of a demonstration. He was going to take Lookout Mountain. He sent General John Geary, with Osterhaus's division and Clough's division, and go across Chattanooga Creek and jump the pickets, some 40 of them there as it turned out, and make a bit of a demonstration while Geary went across the creek north of that area and went up Lookout Mountain. That was very successful. About daylight they started moving, and about 10 o'clock they started moving up. Now this is on the 24th. The 23rd we took Orchard Knob. Beginning the morning of the 24th, Sherman begins to move across the Tennessee River to go to Chickamauga, North Chickamauga Creek, to take the north end of Missionary Ridge, his objective Tunnel Hill. And Hooker is making a demonstration up Lookout Mountain, and those both start the morning of the 24th. And Geary, General John Geary, whose son had been killed at Wauhatchie a few days earlier in an artillery battery, Geary was seeking to make a reputation as well. Hooker was seeking to repair a reputation and perhaps make one. And fortunately, things turned out well for them, because as they moved up Lookout Mountain, they got to about the Cravens house about noon, about midway up. Sharp fight there. But Montgomery Meigs, the quartermaster, is credited with actually coining the term "the battle above the clouds," and that really wasn't used until after the battle. But they were going up through heavy fog. The Confederates on the hill couldn't fire down. They certainly couldn't depress their cannons, and it was an imposing edifice, but militarily of little value, if any value, except for an observation post. Walthall pulled his men back down. Hooker, John Geary, fought up to Craven's house and a bit beyond, and by that time nightfall had come. Hooker sent messages to me that he expected that the enemy would retreat during the night, because he had 12,000 men. Colonel Brown at the very top of Lookout Mountain under General Walthall had 1,200. So after dark, they fell back. And the next morning, Hooker is in possession of Lookout Mountain. So the morning of the 25th, Hooker is in possession of Lookout Mountain. The 23rd, we took Orchard Knob, astonishingly easily. The 24th, Sherman begins to move against the north end of Missionary Ridge, Tunnel Hill, and Geary, under Hooker, goes up Lookout Mountain. and they took Lookout Mountain. The bad part of that is Hooker was very pleased with himself, and I was pleased as well. But as Walthall fell down the mountain, the south side of Lookout Mountain, to cross the creek and go over to Missionary Ridge, he burned all the bridges. So the morning of the 25th, he couldn't get into the fight until late. Now, to go back to Hooker, to Sherman. Sherman had a difficult time getting across that river on the 24th. The river was up, driving rain. The bridge broke, very difficult to repair it. He was delayed getting across the river. He finally got across the river, then he could bring across his artillery. And it was late in the day before he could get into position to go to Missionary Ridge. But what he thought was the north end of Missionary Ridge was Goat Hill. And when he thought there about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, mid-afternoon, he got to the top of that hill and he realized to his horror that he was not on the north end of Missionary Ridge. There was a steep ravine between him and the north end of Missionary Ridge. Remember, I had referenced November the 7th, we found out that our maps were not what they should be. And we found out the hard way, no, they were not accurate. What we thought was the north end of Missionary Ridge was really a separate hill with a deep ravine. At the same time, those troops that we had seen moving that made me think perhaps Bragg was withdrawing, he was sending Patrick Cleburne and 2 divisions or so to Longstreet. When Bragg saw our movements, he recalled Cleburne back, who was at Chickamauga train station, and called those troops back. So during the day then, and that evening, Patrick Cleburne takes position opposite Sherman. Cleburne's on the north end of Missionary Ridge. Sherman's trying to take Tunnel Hill, and Cleburne is defending it. Cleburne is the Stonewall Jackson of the West. He's the best, and his troops are the best that Bragg, indeed possibly the Confederacy, had. So that's who is now opposing Sherman, who is on the wrong hill, trying to get down the ravine, up the ravine, and attack Missionary Ridge. So that went on on the morning of the 25th. As the day dawns, Hooker is up on the mountain, on Lookout Mountain, and coming down Lookout Mountain to get into the fight. I'm getting pressure all the time from President Lincoln and from Halleck, relieve Burnside. I would have waited another several days, but I'm told Burnside can't hold out another several days. So I had to do something to relieve my situation with Tunnel Hill, Lookout Mountain, and Missionary Ridge, and get relief to Burnside's. And the morning of the 25th, Sherman is fighting savagely with Patrick Cleburne on the north end of Missionary Ridge, and that went on for more than 6 hours. Hooker is at the south, trying to get to the south end of Missionary Ridge, and when he comes down Lookout Mountain, he finds out he can't get across the creek. He can't get into the fight, and it took him until 3 o'clock in the afternoon to get across that creek and into the northern end and Bragg's left flank. During the day, in frustration and angst over this is such a simple plan that is not being carried out well, I finally turned to George Thomas and said, attack Missionary Ridge. But the plan was to take only the first row of rifle pits. The Confederates had been so undecided about what to reinforce that they first of all put artillery at the geographic crest of the hill, of the Missionary Ridge, not lower in the military position where the cannon fire would be more effective. What they decided to do was to bring a row of rifle pits at the base of Missionary Ridge, and then one about midway up Missionary Ridge. Well, that turned out to be a disaster, because when Thomas's men got the order to attack, they roared 20 or so thousand strong and charged across that open area to attack the base of Missionary Ridge with orders to take the rifle pits and hold. Now you've got the Army of the Cumberland that was mauled at Chickamauga, September 19th and 20th. They were nearly starved to death until the third week of October. And the first part of November, they're regaining strength and getting rearmed, taking merciless teasing from the other armies that have come in, because you've got the Army of the Potomac under Hooker, you've got the Army of the Tennessee under me, with the Army of the Cumberland, and these three armies had not fought together before. So they have something to prove. And they roared across that field and stormed the initial line of rifle pits and overwhelmed them. In fact, it was difficult to discern the Confederates leaving and the Federals coming in. Captured a number of them. It was a sharp fight, savage fight briefly, and then they fell back up to the line of rifle pits about mid-ridge. It was at this time that they kept on going. Now, I was in great consternation, because that was not the battle plan. Take the first row of rifle pits and stop. And they kept on going, and I turned to George Thomas and I said, who gave that order to go up the ridge? And he turned and said to me rather sharply, well, I certainly didn't. I've been here with you the whole time. And I actually sent messengers to stop and tell them to hold where they were. I understand after the battle that it was a young lieutenant named Arthur MacArthur from Wisconsin who grabbed the colors when the color bearer fell and turned and shouted to his troops, "On, Wisconsin!" and led them up the slope. If it's not true, it ought to be true. It's certainly the stuff legends are made of. And they swept up that hill. They took the second row of rifle pits and then kept on going, and finally surged over the top of the ridge, and Bragg and his army skedaddled going to the east. And all of that took from 3:30 to about 4:30 on the 25th of November. And Missionary Ridge was ours. The evening of the 24th, I had sent a telegram to Washington City, and I said, the fight today progressed favorably. Sherman carried the end of Missionary Ridge, and his right is now at Tunnel Hill, and his left at Chickamauga Creek. Troops from Lookout Valley carried the point of the mountain and now hold the eastern slope and a point high up. Hooker reports 2,000 prisoners taken, besides which a small number have fallen into our hands from Missionary Ridge. And shortly after that, President Lincoln sent me this telegraph: "Your dispatches as to fighting on Monday and Tuesday are here. Well done. Many thanks to all. Remember Burnside." Then later in the day, General Halleck sent me this telegram: "I congratulate you on the success thus far of your plans. I fear that Burnside is hard pushed, and that any further delay may prove fatal. I know you will do all in your power to relieve him." So the pressure is constant from the General-in-Chief and from the Commander-in-Chief. By the end of the day on November the 25th, we had Missionary Ridge. The day before, we had taken Lookout Mountain, and the day before, we had taken Orchard Knob. We did not that day, the 24th or the 25th, till late on the 25th, take the north end of Missionary Ridge. It was only when Bragg ordered Cleburne to fall back that Sherman was able to surge through the ravine and up the hill and secure the north end of Missionary Ridge at Tunnel Hill. Bragg had let an opportunity to snuff out a Federal Army slip through his hands, because when I arrived there back on October 23rd, there were 45,000 men in the Army of the Cumberland and in very bad shape, with no ammunition to speak of, not even enough horses to pull an artillery piece, and enough ammunition to last just scant hours. Couldn't have fought all day. Bragg had 70,000 men, almost 2 to 1, and he did not attack. He felt that we were prisoners that were able to feed ourselves, and he sat on the ridges of Missionary Ridge and Lookout Mountain and Raccoon Mountain, looking down almost benignly upon us, waiting for us to surrender. That changed very quickly, and the situation was reversed within 3 days, November 23rd, 24th, and 25th of '63, when Hooker took Lookout and Thomas took Missionary Ridge, and General Wood had taken Orchard Knob. The matter was resolved, and the Army of the Cumberland, I should think, redeemed itself in the eyes of all. They fought valiantly. At this time, I will bring these reflections to a close, because I have discussed, I think, more than thoroughly what took place on those 3 fateful days in the battles of Chattanooga. Until we meet again and reflect once again on another aspect, person, or place in the war, I am Major General Ulysses S. Grant, bidding you a fond farewell.